Okay, so we're going live now. Welcome to the Leadership Ladder podcast. This podcast is presented to you by BAME on the Move. We're a community-based company that are focused on ensuring that professionals have the tools and the knowledge that they need in order to climb up the career ladder. Today's guest is Chyrel Brown. The trajectory of her career has been remarkable. Today, we're going to learn a bit about her journey from starting out as a housing officer, progressing on to ops manager, then to a director of residents at a housing association, and then eventually to a current position, which is Chief Operations Officer. Chyrel, great to have you on the show. Thanks for joining us.
Good evening, Roy. Thank you for having me. Thank you.
I know it's been a bit of a long time coming before we've had an opportunity to work together. It would be good just to give our listeners a bit of an insight into yourself. So if you could talk a little bit about the role you're currently doing, where it is, and what you're responsible for at the moment, that would be great.
Okay, so I am the Chief Operating Officer at One Housing Group. We're based in London and a bit of Hertfordshire, and I am responsible for customer services and frontline delivery in terms of asset management, property management, repairs and maintenance, contact centres, everything to do with housing management to 17,000 homes. And I am responsible for the front-facing relationships with our local authorities and our stakeholders in that. I do a lot of things in terms of, supporting the customer agenda and customer services, and that's me in totality.
Yes. Okay. Well, what has always struck me is how relatable you are and how down to earth you are. Because a lot of the time, you find yourself in an organisation, you look at the Chief Operations Officer and the C-suite team, and you almost in your head imagine they're from a totally different universe, or they're part of a club that you may never get an opportunity to relate to. But when you actually meet the individual and you realise they're a person just like you are, and you come across relatable individuals like yourself that hold those positions, it's really humbling. Could I just understand a bit about your upbringing and your ethnic origin?
I think, thanks for the compliment, and I think part of me being relatable has been solely grounded on the fact how my family are, in terms of I am of Jamaican heritage. My parents are, Jamaican. I come from a big household. I'm a, middle child, a couple of brothers and a couple of sisters, and my parents have had big ambitions for all of us in terms of what we, just like many Black households, what about education? What about working hard? What about making sure you strive to have your own, because no one's going to give it to you? But at the same time, coming from a big household, if you were talking nonsense to my mother, she'd send you to the back of the queue to come back and talk some good sense. You're not getting attention for a half-hearted outcome. It was around show me the results. And to compare across peers in terms of my siblings, I had to strive to, get my sort of fame from my parents, because my siblings are all science-based and I was an arts-based person. And my mother, who values maths and science, had this sort of alien child in the middle that wanted to draw pictures. So you kind of, you have to find your way in the family environment. And I think that set me up for my work experience, tenfold over.
Yeah, so if you could just talk a little bit about when you started realizing in yourself that you had ambition. I know from speaking to you, your first position in the housing sector was a housing officer, but before you achieved that position, did you realize something in yourself about your aspirations?
I never called it ambition. I didn't recognize it as ambition. I recognized it from my siblings as always wanted to be competitive. We were always, the games that we played, how we were with each other. you wanted to win. And my desire to win or to be, come at the top or be recognized for my performance, I didn't realize how that translated into ambition until I got into the workplace. So when I started as a housing officer and I looked around at my peers and I looked around what I was doing, number one, I didn't see myself in the people that were managing me, but some of the feedback that I received or some of the comments made about quality of work and what you can and cannot do or who makes decisions, very quickly that got into my head around, well, I don't see much more, common sense being portrayed in some situations than I felt that I had myself. So then that sparked a sort of light bulb in my head to say, well, how do I know, or what can I learn to be able to be part of the decision making? So that was the start of my sort of curiosity. So I'd say I would describe myself as a curious being and a competitive person, which has then led to actually that thriving through and turning into what I would now describe as ambition. But at the time, it was just about sometimes winning or proving a point.
Yeah, I'm with you. So just to kind of cast your mind back to that housing officer scenario. So you're there, you're looking at management, you're doing your job, you're looking at management, you're obviously going to them seeking counsel, getting instruction from them. But at some point during those exchanges, you're starting to realize that actually I might be able to do elements of their job. So at some point, I want to try and position myself so that I can do that job.
I think very early, one of my team leaders pointed out to me, I was managing this case, and one of my team leaders pointed out to me around the line of command and who makes actual decisions. And he sort of drew a little piece of paper setting out to me, well, I report to a manager, that person reports to an ops person, that reports to a director, that person reports to this person, and then you get to the CEO. And that always stuck in my mind. I was like, well, between me and that person, there's about 8 people. So
yeah,
straight away, that was like, when I reflect back now, in that conversation, unbeknown to myself, he kind of drew my career path, because I wanted to be the person that he described to me that was making the decision. So Luckily, I was like, okay, what do I need to do to be this team leader or be this ops person? And it was around just observations. I would watch, I would shadow, I would make notes in my head. I would Google role profiles, just looking at the skills and looking what I had for myself. Because when I entered the environment of social housing, I came from an arts background. I've got a textile degree. I was out there thinking I'm going to go and be a creative. And then I've got my background going, you need to get a proper job, the one that's going to, maintain a roof over your head, and one that's going to, make sure that you can eat at the end of the day. Drawing pictures likely to get that, but that's just the background of my parents. And now I've got some great hobbies in terms of that, in that space that I was educated in. But in the housing space, I was always checking myself, thinking that I was not as competent or not as skilled when I looked at some of my managers. So therefore, by Googling role profiles, looking at the competencies, looking at what you needed, I kind of created my own development plan around what are the things I need to do for myself to get to that job. Or downloading role profiles and asking questions of my managers, ticking them off, thinking, how am I gaining or taking that information so I can then communicate it when I go into an interview, that I understand it, I've got the knowledge in practice.
Yeah, it sounds like all that creativity that you had, you transferred that skill into being creative with strategy and planning.
But that's the thing.
Think outside the box.
When I started, I did, when you have no one in front of you that potentially looks like you, I wasn't relating the thing that I was doing as strategizing. I wasn't relating it to being ambitious. I wasn't relating it to leadership skills. I was just relating it to that person told me that I needed to get there to make a decision, and that was me motivated. As I've journey, I've learned actually I was strategizing. I've learned that actually people call it this. So then my CV has gone from very immature in terms of I manage people to I lead people. Instead of thinking about something, I'm problem solving and I'm strategizing. Instead of thinking about something, I'm visioning. So you then learn the words of the game that you're playing, because you have to know the language and the behaviors of the environment to then be able to achieve what you need.
Okay, so all right, so if we're speaking to that person that's in the workplace right now that might be at junior level or have a just above entry level position, say that's working at housing officer level, and has the aspiration to progress to ops manager level, for example, or a managerial role, using a story from your experiences, what kind of techniques would you encourage them to employ to make that transition within their current role, or in terms of applying outside of their organization? What would you do if you was in their shoes?
When I
And
go,
what have you done?
yeah, when I reflect on myself back in 2000 when I started in here, in housing, what I didn't realize that I did a lot of was observe people. And literally, I'm naturally introverted, but I've learned that actually most people, if you ask them a question, are willing to tell you the answer. So as I observe people and I people watch, I found out that most people are complimented when you show them that you've recognized their experience, or you've recognized a quality in them that you want or you need to learn. So when you go up and say, oh, I observed that in you, or I saw you handle this meeting. Wow, how did you do that? Can we have a coffee? Can I talk to you about that? Or just paying the compliment. People will come and seek you out for just general chatter and conversation. And there's no such thing as wasted conversation, because remember, your brain is like a USB, you're just absorbing stuff. So I would say take the time to really observe or find people that are doing the thing that you love or want to do, and watch. And when you have observed enough to ask the appropriate questions about the things that you think you are blind to or you might need in your skill set, then you go and ask how. I saw you do this, or I heard you speak it. Connect with them on LinkedIn, or connect with them just by somebody you might know that may know them. The first time I did it, my heart was racing, because I was like, oh my gosh, they're never going to speak to me because I'm this person. But then when you see the feedback, how people really relish the compliment of being asked, I was like, wow, I'll do more of this. So I have got a lot of just talking to everybody. And when I say talking, it's never about seniority. If I want to know a job and I don't do finance, I will talk to the person that works in admin in finance. I will talk to the person that's the management accountant. I will talk to the director in finance. You talk to many people to build up a picture of the thing that you think that you need, and then you can piece it together. But a good friend. There are so many role profiles out there from jobs advertised in the past or in the future out there for now. If you download role profiles, what they all have is the competencies or the skills or the behaviors or the values of organizations that you go, okay, is that in me, or is that something that I need to seek? Because I've always got a running tab on my personal iPad which says things that I need to acquire. Not because I'm, what's the word, thinking about, oh, I need to do this. It's just things that I see and I think, well, I don't know how to do that, or that might come in useful. And if it's evoked a curiosity in me, I write it down, because the reason why it's evoked something, sometimes you might not know why, but by writing it down, you can revisit it. And if it's still important, go and ask the person that you saw it in, or find somebody that you may think you can get it from, and have conversation.
Yes, yeah, definitely. I think what the point that you make that resonates with me is, so say for example, you're that housing officer, you're in a meeting, you've got ops managers in that meeting. So effectively, they have the role that you're seeking to get. But based on what you're saying, you'd encourage a person to actively participate in the meeting, try and get a full understanding of the ops managers or whoever holds the role in that meeting, so that you can give them feedback on what they've been reporting on, start having conversations with them so that you can, in a way, frame yourself in that space.
Definitely. And contributing doesn't mean speaking, because I was always scared of speaking. Contribution should just be, putting your hand up and say, good point, I agree with that. There's different personalities when you're starting out about your ability to be confident to ask the question. But the more you observe and the more you write down, you're going to collate information that you're going to either group together or think, actually, this is a tactic that I can use. So I would just observe people and watch, actually, who are the most confident people and how are they asking questions? And I used to notice a pattern with people. Sometimes I'd contribute and I think, what did they actually say? So I started writing it down. And actually, when you write down what they were asking or what they were saying, they're not adding anything different than what's in your head. It's just the fact that they were confident to say, I echo, I agree, I support. Good for you. And then I was like, oh, so by just sometimes your voice being heard, you're present even when you're thinking, I don't have anything further to add to debate, but by just your voice being heard, people see that you're in the room. So I'd create little steps for myself in terms of, okay, now that I've just reinforced or said something, what is the next step? And the next step was like, okay, I know that sounds like a silly question, but so what? And I would say to myself, hey, I'm going to ask a question which everybody else is not asking, but I'm going to ask. And will give myself the permission to say, well, if they say, oh, whatever, then it wasn't, oh, whatever, but it was the one question. It was like setting hurdles for myself around the improvement that I needed to make. Then to then be confident enough to go, okay, I've got this. Now let me target the person that I really want to have the conversation with.
Okay. So sticking with your trajectory then. So by this point, you've started forming alliances with your network. You started making your presence felt within the tier above your current position so that the staff know that you're a bit of a mover and shaker and you're interested in what the more senior members of staff are doing. How do you make that transition from being a housing officer to an ops manager? What were the key steps and what can you remember from your journey?
I would say you need to, if you want to do and it's not available where you are now, you need to seek ways to get it. And I recognize that if I stayed in the same place all of the time, then I would have had they see me as the housing officer, I'd get a job, and I'd always be remembered as a housing officer. In my mind, I am telling you, I'm selling myself as I am now the ops manager. So I would go elsewhere and apply, and how you would see me or how I would work through the door is, my name is Chyrel Brown, I've applied for the job and I believe that I'm the candidate to be the operations manager. I'm not saying I'm Chyrel currently the housing officer and I believe I'm going to be the ops manager. You speak to, you act to the position that you're applying for. And I've got a thing about projecting to people the thing that you are doing. So all the time when I'm practicing for that new role or that application, months before that, I'm thinking, acting, dressing, behaving as that person. Now, sometimes your current line manager might try to put you back into, well, this is your job and do this. But I would volunteer for things or would try things out in my mind to, act it out. So by the time I walked into the interview, I've got real life examples, I've got real life body language, I've got real life presence of being that person. And sometimes people would critique me and say, well, actually, you're not that person for these reasons, or you're not ready for these reasons. But I just took that, that's fine. I didn't pass my driving test today, but I'm still going to drive tomorrow. So let me just crack on. So, and also you have to remember, sometimes when you are being managed by people, it's in their interest for you to do the best job you're employed to do, not the job that you want to do in advance of the job that you're in. So yes. When you're given feedback, it's around, I'm a line manager myself and I've got many people around me and I want them to do their best. Their success is my success. And therefore, sometimes my focus is on about them doing the best job. Yes, I've got to put my development hat on and say, how do I make them better? But ultimately, sometimes when you're in the haste of things, I'm just like, please just do your bestest job. And I then quickly recognized, if my manager wants me to do my bestest job now, actually it's down to me to invest in what I need for myself. And that's why you have to go about the developing out, the acting out, the being present in what you want. I've got this whole thing about visualization. You need to be able to visualize it. You need to be able to speak to it. You need to be able to tell other people. Because if you're not visualizing it and speaking to other people, you don't believe it yourself. It's still a dream. The difference between dreams and reality is your ability to turn it into action. And for me, turning it into action is around how, like, literally, I'd come to work and be literally, I'd cut my hair and put on a new dress, and people are like, what are you doing? Okay, it's fine. You recognized. They didn't know what I knew, but I recognized what I was doing myself. And that was a tick in my mind. Because outwardly, you saw the change, but you don't understand why I'm changing. But for me, it was a tick in my head. And then when I go to ready, because I'm already in that flow, you know, when people are saying to me, I remember, and also authenticity, being authentic is another thing. When I was trying my very hardest to get from that housing officer to that ops role, I was emulating other people, you know, so I'm a very bold, look at me in the pink top today. I'm not a person who wears the grey suit and the, you know, and the, you know, be blended in the background. I'm not that person. However, there are some that make you believe that you need to be a certain way to be in senior leadership. So I would go along to my first leadership interviews in the grey dress, in the black dress, and sit there and not be my best self. The day that I came out my interview after rejection and I was exhausted trying to act up other people's behaviors, I was like, never again. So the next interview I went along, I put on a pink brooch, had a pink cardigan on, and I walked in there as my best self, and I got that job. Because not only was I projecting that I am that person, I turned up being myself.
Yeah, I think you make a great point about reinventing yourself once you've decided that you're ready for the next level, and the active steps that you took to, in a way, carve out a new version of yourself that people could react to visually, because they can see you've made changes in your body language, in the way that you projected yourself when you made that transition. I think that speaks to your consciousness as well.
And I wouldn't say that it's around, what's the word, finishing off with what I was. It's around the evolution of yourself. You know, there is growth in us as humans. You know, our brains develop and our brains change every few years. You have to recognize that if you don't physically show that to people or new people, they will still see you as the person that was. And even as I've also, you know, developed within organizations, you know, the common thing with people is like, oh, she's young, or oh, isn't she bubbly? Isn't she the friendly one? People want to put you into a box. So it's your responsibility to make sure whatever preconception people have of you, when you're ready to do something, you need to step out the box, because they're not going to move you out the box. And if they don't allow you out the box, you need to find your own box to get into. And that means another organization or another thing you need to do in your life, because if you are dependent on others for your complete success, then it doesn't work. I'm surrounded by good scaffolding, by good networks, by good people. But when it comes to the crunch, I need to know that if I'm ready to step off, I need to step off.
It sounds as though you are comfortable with making sure that you brand yourself, and in a way, you're responsible for your own personal identity, your own professional brand. So rather than say a recruiter might look at your CV and think, all right, this is a career housing officer, this is who this person is going to be. In your mind, you might decide, actually, one day I'm going to be a COO. And in order for me to get to that position, this is how I'm going to brand myself, and this is how I want to be seen each time I go into my new job or my current job.
I have live examples of that. So I applied, somebody approached me for a particular position, and the CEO of that organization saw my CV and said, no, thanks, it's just housing. You know, it's a career housing person. I need somebody with a bit more spark about them. So thank you. Because of how this world is, I met that same person that rejected me just randomly at a conference, and conversation, he's like, oh, I've come across your name. And I turned around and giggled and said, but remember, you told the recruiter that I wasn't the person for you. Because if I knew who you was, I wouldn't have said no. So there is a difference in what people perceive you to be versus what you are. And I've always been very relentless as I am me. And people will personally provide you with feedback where you think, well, that's not about what I do, that's about my character. Or that's not what I said, that's just the way my environment and how I speak. Or, I talk very openly about, I believe in good intuition, good feeling, good sense. But that intuition is made up of 21 years experience. But when I say those words, people will go, But I'm a sense person, I'm a creative person. And I think I've learnt to be data driven and practical. That's the jobs that I've done. But do not underestimate what you naturally bring to the table. So 360 feedback is always my biggest thing. You go out and get 360 feedback, and I'm that person that goes to the bottom of the page to see all the negative things. Now, really and truly, 360 feedback is not about I'm right-handed. It's not about putting down your right hand and use your left hand because somebody said you need to practice the things you're not so good at. What it is being mindful that actually sometimes you can pick up something with your left hand and be aware that those things may present themselves to you more frequently than your mind or your cognition is picking up. So, but you have to know for yourself how to use it. Because for many years, I would concentrate on those things at the bottom of the list and be thinking about, oh, I need to do this, and oh, I need to be more, I needed to be more analytical. Oh, I need to be this. But when I was then presenting myself as those things, I wasn't walking into the room as my authentic self. I was walking in the room using my left hand, thinking I was going to be successful. Yes, I can use it, but I'm not presenting myself as the strongest and the best me.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful just to get a bit more insight into vulnerabilities, because I imagine, all right, so you've moved on as a housing officer, you've got to the point where you're operations manager now, you've got more responsibility, but at the same time, it's almost like you're constantly looking up and venturing outside of your comfort zone. And when you venture outside of your comfort zone to see what's going on, to see if there's opportunities for growth, you can often find yourself in a situation where you're a bit uncomfortable and you feel vulnerable. Could you speak about times that you felt that and some of the measures that you've taken just to overcome that mind state?
I would speak so for a long time in every new job, I felt like the biggest imposter. Remember, I've acted it out to get there in terms of thinking, feeling, behaving. And then when I get there, I'm like, oh my gosh, now I've got to actually do it. And being somebody who's got into an organization without the connectivity in terms of the network or the people in that organization that had maybe, have the same cultural background as myself, sometimes that was a very lonely place. So you're checking yourself thinking, did I say that right? Have I read that right? Have I made the right decisions? But also, if I get it wrong, they may judge every other Black woman who they gave an opportunity because of what I did. Yeah. So therefore, you're walking around with that sense of responsibility of, I'm going to show you that you can choose another person that looks like me because I'm great. And at the same time, there's an overarching sense of gratefulness to the organization for giving me the opportunity. So I'd work endless hours trying to prove them that I was the best candidate and the best prize that they ever had, but not recognizing they wouldn't have chosen me in the first place if I wasn't good. I did not give myself the credit for being as good as I wanted, or other people would see it in me, but I wouldn't see it in myself. I was still on that sort of competitiveness around, how do I make it better? How do I show I'm stronger? That thing where, your parents tell you, where's the other one when you got 9 out of 10? It's that thing that was always in the back of my mind that is not 10 out of 10 yet. So I was mentally competitive with myself, but then I projected that in terms of a sense of doing more, trying more, and allowing sometimes the feedback to emotionally impact on me, because I was like, what, you're telling me that I use my left hand today and I should have used my right, and go home wounded about it, but come back in the next day even more relentless to show you that I could be brilliant at my left hand, not recognizing that was making me exhausted. It takes time to be confident in yourself and believe in the true, the true you, and to turn up and to be able to be the true you. And it's also very difficult that when people see you progressing, there are some people that are clapping for you and there are some people that just won't like it. And I wasn't prepared for the not liking or the people feeling as I was natural competition. Because remember, I wasn't recognizing my ambitious as that person or that line manager thinks that I want to step into their space. I was just thinking, I need to win, I need to show you. It was all about my game rather than their game. But I didn't see the politics of their game interfering with my game. So it would get to a conflict point or a point where I'd go, oh, that's really obvious. I didn't recognize that because unbeknown to all these people, I was only running a race with myself. I wasn't wanting a job because I never wanted a job of my line manager. I wanted another job. Because remember, I've got my plan of those 8 jobs that I was working my way through. And if my job wasn't that job, I don't understand why we're having this debate. Or if I wanted to go on a course or do something differently, the whole sort of trying to get people's buy-in for that in terms of, well, you're in housing management, why do you want to do a degree in regeneration? Or why do you want to do social politics? Or why do you want to do this? And it was trying to always explain, but not expose my bigger plan. So you want to share enough for the support, but at the same time, just like, And I would say there was naivety in me in my early career as I, moved from operations director into operations manager into my first director role, because I was looking at my peers as though they were great and I was just landed. I didn't recognize, and it took a long time for me to look at my previous experience getting there, to value that and to know that that made me a competitive candidate. Because I'm still just looking at my lane. For the whole time in my career, I wasn't looking at anybody else. I was like, I'm the pace for my race. Whereas actually, sometimes I got to the point that actually, I've lapped this person, or that person has lapped me. Why is that? So when I started looking to my left and the right, then I recognized actually there's more politics to this than I first recognized.
So just to that point then, it sounds as though you had a single-minded focus and you kept your blinkers on towards a goal that you set for yourself, rather than being dependent on the feedback that you got from your senior members of staff. Potentially they might see you as something, but you see yourself as something else. Do you recommend that single-minded focus, or did you feel that maybe you could have incorporated a little bit more awareness of the politics that were going on around you?
I learned the politics. I learned the politics by the time I got into being I would say just on the point of being an assistant director into a director role. And I saw actually, once you started getting into that sphere of leadership, you need a network of support to help you. And being driven without people, it's a bit like when I'm a fan of Formula One. And when you watch Formula One, to win is not just about your driving capability, it's about the machine and the timing of the other people in that team to help you be your best. So then I quickly recognized what strategies do I need, and what people or what team do I need around me, or what connectivities do I need to make to be able to get around that track in the most, quickest time, but in a time where I am, more people are cheering for me than I'm cheering for myself.
No, that's a good analogy. I like the Formula One analogy.
The more people that are cheering for you because it's a team effort, the more uplifted you are. And that's when I got into, getting coaches and being mentored and making connections over tea and coffee, because I needed people to be my McLaren. I needed people around me that were going to help me with my left hand blind side, but not in a way which is around, oh, Chyrel, use your left hand like this. It was around, actually, I saw myself now as going from somebody that was doing sort of junior athletics or, go-karting into, how do you come now a sort of an elite athlete? How do you step from, I'm playing football on a Sunday and I now want to be a professional? So for me, as soon as I got into that director space, I wanted to be recognized, not just as Chyrel, who made good as a housing officer. I wanted to be known as, I'm now in that network of professional people. I'm recognized for more than just the job I do, but the contribution that I can make, because now I'm professional. But I can't do that without people being able to speak for me, say for me, that they recognize that I am that person.
Yeah, no, I think we're going to touch more on how you assemble your team or your mastermind group and how you make the most out of the people within your networks later on in this conversation. I think it would be helpful to get a bit more of an insight as to when you were in that ops manager role, and say you were getting to the point where you're starting to act up and you're starting to make that transition into assistant director. Can you talk me through your initial experiences reporting to the executive board? Maybe tell me about the strategy that you used to make yourself comfortable in that environment and things like that.
The one thing that I am is a chatterbox. I talk to everybody. From the time I enter a building of work, I'm talking to the person on reception, to the person picking up the cups, to the CEO. I would talk to anybody. Everybody is somebody that you can speak to. And the more people you speak to in an organization, the more connected you are. And the more connected you are, the more people then, you are part of the organization. So when I was an ops manager, very quickly, and it was quite unique at the time, I would have access to the CEO, talking to the HR director, the CFO. I would be naturally just walking past and having conversations. And then one day also, we were bidding for some work, this regeneration scheme. And a group development director is like, we've got this piece of work to do. It involves some Saturday work. Who wants to volunteer? I put my hand up. We got to this scheme on the Saturday, and unbeknownst to us, the residents who were potentially going to vote for the work that we did came down very early before the arranged tour. But my mother and my parents, being of the background that they are, if you don't turn up somewhere at least 20, 15 minutes before the time, then you're late, right? So I got there early and was able to do some networking with these people that had turned up randomly before we were ready to do the tour. So when the development director saw me there, already engaged in the conversation, like, how did you know they were coming early? I didn't, but I was early. And from that, I got into a different space and got into do projects because somehow they saw me and they spoke to me and they said hello, but that then led to proper conversation because the residents were talking to me and they were engaged with me and they were articulate with me. He's like, well, we need you on this project team. We need you to be you've got a relatable thing about you, which we don't have. And from there, I was then able to get into a sphere of people to this day that would be my advocates. And from that experience, I then got in very quickly. I got the support to do a regeneration degree. I got support to do some social politics. I got so much learning and development in that space because I was, literally, as I said, I turned up, I was ready, I was proactive. But then when I got the opportunity, I didn't just see it as I'm talking to this director today. I leveraged the fact that he recognized me and made sure that as soon as he said, do you want to become involved? I didn't know what he was offering. I said, yes. And a lot of things that I've done to date, I would say in the first instance, wasn't monetized in the way that it should have. And if I were to go back, I would be more confident in saying, well, what is what is the deal here? But because I was on a mission in terms of just give me that thing, it was never about the money. Whereas I think sometimes if I tell my younger self now, they're like, Miss Bryan, you weren't too smart there. However, it is paid tenfold now. So sometimes I would say to people, and I still do a lot of volunteering now, there are pros and cons about being, tight on what you need and what you want in terms of your package. But then now I sometimes think about what is the experience or the exposure of the person that I'm going to be engaged with and how valuable is that going to be to my CV or my growth.
So talk me through your first boardroom presentation, your first the first time that you were reporting to the most senior people that you've ever been around, and it's all on you to communicate to them what the deliverables are on your project. Talk me through that first experience. I imagine you were sweating.
My first experience was a very uncomfortable, sweaty situation. And to this day, I will never go into a meeting to do a presentation wearing anything but a dark colour because I walked in there in a sort of a light coloured top. And for the whole time, I was sweating, I was stumbling in my mind over my words. I prepared until I had brain freeze in terms of the things that I had to say. In fact, I think I was over-prepared to the fact that it came across as I was, talking to it. And I was not paying attention to the audience. I was just paying attention to, how does my voice sound? Did I miss that? If I missed a point in my head, I'd be like, let me just take you back to that. I was so self-critical. It was like another person looking down at myself for that whole 45 minutes that I did not enjoy that experience. But the worst thing is, after that, when I got feedback, everybody said it was great. So once again, the perfectionist in myself, or the judge in myself about what is good and how do I compete and how I deliver it against, the people that I was sitting around that table, because they didn't look like me. I just want to make sure that you don't have any excuse not to ask me to come back, or in case there's another person that looks like me, you're not going to judge them because I was so incompetent. But actually, I left out there literally losing 2 stone in my body weight of sweat. And they were just like, is it hot in here? And I was like, yeah, maybe. That's their only feedback, not about the quality of my work. But the torture that I put on myself, and to this day, the sort of the nervousness, and people will say to me all the time that you speak well and you're very good at public speaking, but I have to turn down the voice in my head to be able to dial up what I need to deliver.
Yeah, I remember from a previous conversation, you telling me about how the leaders in the room, some of the feedback that you got was, excellent presentation. Why were you so nervous? As though you had no reason to be nervous whatsoever. So what did you do with that feedback so that you was more on point or more comfortable next time?
As I said, you learn, and through having a coach and mentors, I've learned things. So some of the things I say, I'll go in there and I'm so hot and sweaty. Well, put on a dark colored dress or put on a dark colored top. Who knows? That's down to you and your hotness. Yeah. Then it would be like, I go into the room and I don't know what they're going to say. I don't know who they are. They're judging. Well, actually, if you're an athlete, you don't walk up to the start line cold, do you? This is from mentoring and from a coach. You don't start cold. What things do you need to do to get yourself match ready or race ready? So therefore, I learned mechanisms of who are the people in that meeting, right? How do I circulate my presentation or my paper in advance? Who do I know is contentious over a certain point? Let me go and highlight those points to them and have the discussion and give them time to provide feedback. Let me also know about who I'm going to be supporting. I put this in there because I know you wanted to see that. Is that okay? Would you like me to put it in a different way? And I would make sure that by the time I got into the meeting, even if it was just around turning up early and saying, good morning, how you doing? How was your day? Happy Wednesday, how you doing? All of those things help me. By the time I get to deliver my presentation, I'm not cold. I am warmed up. So therefore, I've already prepared myself in terms of, well, my stress levels are down now because I kind of know what's coming. Also, I'm wearing a dark colored dress, so I'm not that sweaty. So I'm more comfortable before I even get going. And therefore, I'm more able to give a authentic meeting rather than the person who's sitting there talking to myself about what I'm potentially or not saying.
Yeah. So in a way, find ways to turn down the volume of the commentator in your head that is so critical that it doesn't allow you to focus on what you're doing. And also, where possible, find opportunities to understand who you're presenting to, give them an opportunity to see what you're presenting before you present it, get some feedback so that you go in there to an audience that's already been warmed up, who where possible you've got some familiarity with, and you're not cold and you're more comfortable and confident in that situation.
Most definitely. And then also get some feedback, go back, and even the ones that were supporting you, just ask, how was that?
Yeah. You mentioned about the relationships that you've been able to establish with coaches and mentors. If you could just expand a little bit about how you sort out coaches, how you sort out mentors, how you managed to get a framework for the relationship that was mutually beneficial, and how you've managed to maintain and build on those relationships so that you can become your ultimate self, as it were, with their help.
when I've always been in an operations background, and one of the top feet, or one of the, the big things that people always used to say to me was, you're very operational, and to step into the next sphere, you need to be more strategic. You need to demonstrate, strategize it. You need to be able to demonstrate that you understand and are able to be, more commercial. And they used to use words which didn't reflect the things that I was doing in my day job or in my role profile or what I had access to. But I did know people from work that were in that space. And through my time of looking for work or being involved in recruitment, I've met a number of recruiters that are very helpful. I've met a number of managers in other organizations that are very helpful. And what I did was go and speak to it. Instead of just saying, oh, they said I'm not strategic, what do I do? Woe me. I went and told people that I'm looking for strategic experience. As a recruiter, what are you looking for when it's strategic? As a employer, what are you looking for? As a person on a leadership team, what do you mean by that? Because people have like to throw words at you, but don't tell you examples of how you make that a reality. So I went and did my homework about what that actually meant, and then literally spoke to everybody and said, I'm looking for in life. My biggest advice would be, if you don't ask, you don't get. The majority of the time, people don't tell you no. If they tell you no, it's going to be, well, I can't do it now, come back later. So I would say, I went out and I asked people, I said, I'm looking for this. I don't know how I'm going to get it, but I'm looking for it. And just through talking, people then said to me, let's talk to this person, talk to that person. And through talking to, I think I had about 4 or 5 conversations with different people. And somebody recommended me to speak to this woman. And I was telling her that I've had some acting up experience. I want to get into that next position, but I don't have practical example. And she went to say to me, oh, come and shadow my board. You've got similar background to me. I understand that because I was there myself. Come and shadow my board. And I went in and shadowed her board, and I spent some time observing them. I spent some time with them in terms of their away days and just interacting with them. And not only able to recognize it's a terminology and some of the things that I had mental blocks in my head, but practically, because when I got there, I contributed to so much, I ended up getting a on that board, because the thing that they said I didn't have, it was just about how I was articulating, because I didn't understand it conceptually. But through my network and through my peers, those recommendations, and being able to be open about what I was looking for, because that was the thing that I needed to overcome. Lots of people helped me, but also then feeding back to my coach or feeding back to them, it's everything. If somebody gives you advice or somebody supports you, the biggest compliment that you can give them is go back and tell them how you used it, how it benefited you, how you tried it, but it didn't work for you and you tried something else. Because when you give that feedback, let me tell you, it's a bit like that Formula One. The team gets around you again and they want to help you even more. Because going back to my mentors, going back to my coaches, going back to those recruiters, going and saying, oh my goodness, because of that conversation, when I spoke to that person who then got me this, wow. And I used to call that, I used to say, oh, I'm so grateful. I don't say grateful anymore. I say thank you for the support. But that was really helpful.
Yeah, no, I really will take that point personally myself, because a lot of the time you go through life, you build up so much relationships in your network, but you don't nurture them to the level that you should do. So you get someone that gives you help and guidance to get through an interview or to give a good account of yourself in a board meeting. You go back to them and say, oh, thanks, that was really helpful. But you don't actually tell them the parts of their advice that they gave you that helped you be successful in that situation, so that they're actually bought into that success as well, and they can share it with you, because then that obviously solidifies the relationship that you have with them, gives you something to build on. So that's really helpful.
And an example of that, this morning I was on a leadership program, listening to the chief medical officer and the chief scientific officer, in terms of a COVID work program this morning. And the reason why I got into that sphere with all these CEOs and all these leaders across local authorities and government, in terms of Secretary of State, department secretaries were there, was because of a relationship that I had with a mentor. That mentor has been part of my success, had access to something, and then recommended me because of what's going on with Black Lives Matters, and because she sees there's underrepresentation in that group. And here I am sitting there and hearing these conversations and being part of a group where I think, wow, you know, I would have known about that forum, number one, to apply for that leadership program, but then number two, to get on there and then to be able to then feed back and have the conversation, because we were both on that that conference talk this morning, is quite powerful.
Yeah, definitely. It seems like the legacy of your relationship with your key mentors and coaches lives on to this day, and it's still bearing fruit for you.
It is, because people want to share in your success. People enjoy, you know, sharing in your success. And as I said, in team sports, when an individual wins, you know, people cheer and they celebrate that and they feel part of it. And, you know, you know, even now I say my success is a contribution of lots of scaffolding around me and lots of individual input and a lot of time. But at the same time, you have to do the work yourself to be the optimum athlete. You know, coaching, you know, Usain Bolt doesn't win races if he doesn't have the mentality to get up and do what he needs to do in the morning. He'll have, you know, people around him coaching him, be faster, giving you feedback. You need that in the work environment. And that's why a lot of my analogies refer to sport and refer to, you know, racing. You have to see the corporate environment in a similar way to be successful. And if you think of any successful sporting person or a person in the public eye, go and Google who's around them, because they are not alone. And that to me is a critical thing that I learned when I stepped up into that sort of that leadership sphere. Yeah,
so now just in the career trajectory, so you've made the transition into a director level position, and you're starting to make a decision about your next step. What made you target a chief operations officer position, and what was your strategy in terms of making that transition from director to that next level?
You know, in my mind, I say I never, in that, you know, back when I started, I had the 8 steps in the ladder. I just saw them as steps. They didn't have the names or the job roles on them. It was just around the 8 steps to get there. And when I became the sort of you know, director, and an opportunity came up to do some acting up on the exec team, when it was presented to me, my first thing was some acting up. Why me? No, I'm not ready. This is too much. It's too big. Oh my gosh. And I thought about all the things why I would fail. Okay. Anyway, you know, to my what's the word? Good luck and fortune, I still managed to, with all my sort of no thank you at the first instance, go boy, sleep on it, come back because we want you to be you. Through my good luck, I would say, and also, you know, sometimes, you know, things go for you. I don't believe a lot in luck in terms of career, but sometimes you do have good fortune. I got the opportunity to do that, and it was for nearly 6.5 months. And for the first 3 months on that table, that top table in the exec team, I got through the doors. It was like the Wizard of Oz. You got through the doors, and I couldn't believe that I got through the doors. And spent 3 months of that time just watching and being scared. Not scared of what I know, but scared of, if I say something, what does that do? Or you're saying something and I don't agree, but I'm scared because I've only got an acting up position here.
Is this linked to your imposter syndrome that you felt years previous?
It's imposter, but it's also the ability of, you know, when like I describe it as the Wizard of Oz, because when I was in there, sometimes I was thinking, there's a really simple solution to this. And I was watching the conversation and thinking, how don't you see it simple? But because I didn't, rate myself as in, this is the exec team and I've been given an acting up opportunity. How can I come in here after being here for 2 minutes and saying, this is simple, why are you fretting about this? So I was watching thinking, And then there were some things that I was exposed to that I had no clue about. And I wasn't confident to put my hand up and say, I don't know. I was sitting in the meeting Googling finance language, EBITDA, like literally going, okay, and I've got what they're talking about. It was like every day just for 3 months running on adrenaline. However, in hindsight, it was the best 3 months that I had. Because once I got into the point of, okay, this is nearly over, and I need now to go, you don't realize, like when you eat too much cake, you don't realize you've outgrown the jeans until you try to put them back on. I knew that I could not go back to my old job in the way that I had done. So, because even though I sat there and didn't say very much, I was learning so much and absorbing so much and thinking, well, this is a nonsense, or this is great, or what about this? And I've got a view about this. I would have one-on-one conversations, but shy away from the group conversations. And 3 months down, it clicked, and I was like, I ain't got long to go, so let me start saying a bit more. And as I started to say a bit more and started to feel more of the team, the time was running out. So I was like, oh, the palpitations of having to go back to the thing that now I didn't recognize I'd outgrown, even before I got into that acting up position. I was like, okay, I had a previous HR director that said to me, always, I lost this big project and it was awful. And she said to me, in your career, there will always be disappointment, but there are good things to be disappointed. But you take to your bed or you take a walk for one day only. You do not wallow. And as the realization came of this is not going to be mine and somebody else is now going to have the job that I remember, I was like, oh, I'm not ready for. And then 3 months in, I'm more than ready for. But in 3 months' time, it's not going to be mine. And I'm in a room watching another person being interviewed for the role that was like, oh my gosh, this is too much. So instead of feeling sorry for myself, in my head was like, okay, actually, that job that I was doing is not mine. How do I go about creating the job that is mine? So not only was I not going to be, crying over the job that I didn't get to do, I made sure that the job that I applied for in terms of Chief Operating Officer was bigger, more broader, more complex than the one that I tried for 6 months. Because remember, I knew now that I could do it. So if I went and then got the same similar job that I was acting up in, then it wouldn't have been enough. So then I was like, all right, then I'll show you.
Definitely.
I told everybody I came across, my CV was changed from Director of Resident Services to Chief Operating Officer. And lots of people were laughing at me. Why are you doing that? That's not your job. That's not your job. And I was like, I know it's not my job, but it's a job that I'm going to have and the job that I'm going to do. And I told people, and people say to me, what do you want to do in your next move? Your secondment has come to the end. And I was like, I want to be Queen of the Universe, equivalent to Chief Operating Officer, whatever you want to describe it, that's the job I want to do. I want to be the center of an organization and I want to run it. Not a little bit of it, I want to run it. And I talked to lots of people, and in that talking came, the reality. Because when the job I got came about, the conversation came to me and they said, Chyrel, remember that conversation we had at a conference when you told me, I've seen this job which into the market and I think that would be you need to apply. So through the relentlessness of people laughing and saying, oh, it's not going to materialize what you're talking about, ha, ha, ha. But also while being in work, and remember, when I came out of the acting up job, I cut my hair, I dressed differently. I'm like, if you lot think that I'm going to be sitting there sorry for myself, I remember the first day I walked in after going back to my old job. I walked in there with a new dress, which was bright orange. I bought new shoes. My hair was different. And people were like, what's the matter with you? Are you just like trying to style it out? And I was like, yeah, okay, I'm styling it out. Because they were so focused on the rejection of not me being in that job. How does it feel sitting in the office and now sitting back out with normal people? Fine. Because I wasn't focused on that.
But you already got your crosshairs on the next target.
But for the people around me, they were focused on the thing that I had lost, not the thing that I saw myself, that actually those 6 months had prepared me beyond all the things I could have recognized. It gave me a safe place to learn. Because remember, if I walked into the chief operating officer job before doing those 3 months of sitting and thinking, oh my God, this job is too big for me, I'd have walked into my new job now thinking that I couldn't. On my day one in my new job, I walked in there, so I'm ready. And literally next week, Wednesday, it would be a year. And one of the biggest, most joyful things to me is people, you know, in my organization are so lovely, but I know that I've made a difference, and I've made a difference from day one.
Yeah, I can only imagine the feeling when you've made the transition from someone that's sitting in a meeting at that level, nervous to put their hand up, even though in your mind you've got a clear understanding of what the solution is, to getting to the point where you feel like you belong in the room and you're comfortable with saying, actually, guys, I would suggest that we approach this way and start leading the conversation so people start understanding your competence. Do you remember doing that? Do you remember after acting up, getting that confidence and being in a position where you felt comfortable about leading the discussion and letting people know that you actually did have the solutions? You weren't just acting up, you actually belonged.
Oh, yes. And I think a big part of because it took me from the time of the last day to getting the job, it took me, and this is another thing I need to tell people, you have to be, patient, and know that this is not a 100-meter race. You have to have stamina at this. It took me 18 months from the day that I stopped that acting up to get the job and start. Yeah. But if you waste your time going back to the thing that you were and you don't use that time properly, right? The 6 months that I would have done would have been, you know, people are like, well, that was, because by the time I started to apply and get the job, well, that was 9 months ago. How is that relevant now? Was I made sure that every day after going back to my job was never wasted, never. But also the relationship that I built with the exec team, with me, once you open the jack end, the box, you can't put it back in. So the fact that I had a relationship with the CEO, the fact that I had a relationship with the CFO, the fact that I had a relationship with the deputy CEO, you can't take that back. So therefore, yes, I might be sitting there in a senior leadership briefing, but I'm going to email you and they're going to email me stuff which no one has sight to because I was on the exec team. So therefore, I didn't shy away from maintaining those relationships and also going out externally because people recognize me externally as the interim, group director for, customer and or housing service or whatever it was called at the time. You see, literally a year ago, and I can't remember because you imagine, because like literally I'm always acting in the space that I'm in. So I was in that space, I was projecting externally, I was walking into meetings, yes, my job, my badge says this, but my parents in my journey or in my success has always told me, I don't care what your badge or your badge is, if you don't have good courtesy or you don't know where you're coming from or you don't act properly, then who are you? So the badge to me or the name on the badge didn't matter because ultimately my head and my game was on what I needed to be. So for the rest of you calling me whatever, I'm like, and I love chess. I go back to games all the time. Everybody has something in themselves that they enjoy, or they have a competitiveness, or they have a sort of I would say I have a wicked sense of humor. In my journey or my career, I have learned to strategize by looking at it as chess. There are some things in life where people will step to you or say things that will send you over the edge. And in my mind, I look at it and think, is this a pawn or is this my bishop? Is this a thing that, yes, I feel it in my soul, but are you worth my time to respond to this? And in that transition from being the acting up person, going back to the director person, when people were testing me and coming to me all the time to tell me about my fallback to my position, or looking and say, ha ha, or some people saying, well, they would have given it to you if you was this person. And how does it feel because you're this person? And oh my God, we feel so bad for you. Another thing, misery of company. So if I allowed myself to be consumed by the supporters that were sorry for me, or the supporters that were joyful that I didn't get it, then I would have been done for. So that's why I say you need your own sense of, grounding and a network beyond the people that see you in your job that is currently yours. Because if they were my only pool of energy or my only pool of growth, I would have been stuck. Yeah. And I would have been always known as the person that didn't get the job. That is not my lane and that's not my race. I'm over here. And in fact, when I go and I say to everybody, remember when I sent my CV out 18 months ago and you were laughing at me? Well, who's laughing now? And even though I say to myself, oh, don't be petty, the joy in my heart knowing that I'm able to do it, let me tell you, people say what motivates you. Motivation for me is that internal win. It's never about the, I'm fortunate enough, my job is well paid, I've got, a nice life, but the internal satisfaction of doing what you set out to do, I cannot, underestimate what that does for me. And people are motivated by different things. And sometimes for me, my first job, I was, here and this job here, each win, no matter the price of the salary, has had just the same level of, oh my goodness, the delight.
Yeah. No. I think the insights that you've shared are really helpful, because you've brought our listeners on the journey from you being a housing officer to you being a chief operations officer at this moment in time. Just to kind of bring this discussion to conclusion, I've got a few other questions. Okay. I know that you mentioned visualization, so projecting your thoughts into images in your mind. How do you do that? So for someone that's has their aspirations, they're not used to visualizing what they actually want, how do you do it? Is it through guided meditation? Is it through walking around and being in environments that you want to work in? How do you do it?
I would say in my soul, I'm creative, and I collect things that bring me joy. Yeah. Or I see things, or I go and touch things that bring me joy. And I'm all about, what are the things I admire? What are the things that are, my aspirations? And I definitely wanted to create myself a space or an environment which filled my soul with a bit more sort of contentment. So for me, in terms of career, I'm meticulous at reading, role profiles, looking at what people are doing, looking at the language, what's out there, and writing it down and drawing it out. What does that look like? What does that structure look like? What does that person look like? So I create a sort of imagery on my computer about the things that I think are in the world. Also, I am a storyteller and good language and good, being able to reference what I've heard. So in terms of my visualization, I talk to people. So when you share experiences or you have a conversation, whatever I hear, but especially like this conversation, the questions that you hear back from me, you just asked me this evening, I will record that in my head and I will play back the conversation and I'll write down some key things and thinking, gosh, I didn't remember that. And I'll put that in my book, because that all adds up into actually my next job. I need to talk more about that because I forgot that I did that. Or actually, these are the things that are some of the things that have actually made me really happy. So I record things, I view things, I literally go to places that feel good. So I'm all about a good walk to a park, going up to high points, looking out and looking at scale. No, I am, I've got a fear for heights, but I love a good high point. Like literally up on the highest building on a rooftop. And, like on a Sunday, I'll walk up to Greenwich Park and look over at Canary Wharf. When you see scale and you see yourself in the scale, when people are giving you negative feedback, it shows the scale of that negative feedback. Or when you've got a problem and you see yourself in the context of the wider world, it gives you context. So sometimes in my sort of gathering of information, it's reminding myself that although this is a battle for me, or the success I've had so far might seem big, actually there's more out there to be had. So if you limit yourself, like I said, I've got the 8 jobs to do and there's 1 to go now. Actually, if I settle at that, when I look at the world and the scale of the world and the things that I've learned or the things that I could give back, that now just seems like, well, that was that agenda. Let me now get a new page on what do I need to do next? Because that is the sense of growth. We grow, we learn, we nurture, but you have to, see yourself in, in the bigger context than what you are individually.
No, that's amazing. Really appreciate that response to the question. What obviously this year has been crazy as far as what's been happening with COVID-19 and Black Lives Matter. There's a lot of people that are at a crossroads in their career, either because they've been made redundant or they've got serious concerns about what their next step is going to be. So for someone that is at a pivotal moment in their career, has aspirations to progress up the career ladder and reinvent themselves so that they can reach their full potential, based on your previous experience, what top 3 tips would you give them, just in terms of characteristics, habits, things you've done, whichever?
I would say number 1 is prepare yourself to be ready. So, when you are looking to do something new, or you're looking to change, or you're looking to reinvent, or you're looking to apply for something, be prepared and be ready. You can't, you need to be race ready, you need to be trained ready. You never know when something might cross your path. And I'm aware, that thing we just talked about, projection to the world, or projection to the universe, or projection to other people. I'm always out there. When you meet people, never believe because they're not in your field of work that they may not or cannot help you. The amount of random conversations I've had. I went to a dinner at Christmas last year, and I was sitting next to this guy, and I've got this thing about when I get to the age of 55, I want to get and do some more things which are more, working with charities and stuff. And sitting next to this random person and just started talking. He said, "What do you do?" He said he works for an investment bank. I said, "I work in housing." He goes, "Oh my goodness, what does that mean?" And he said to me, "Wow, that's a stressful job. How do you cope?" I said, "Because when I'm 55, I'm going to go and do some charity work, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that." And he goes, "Oh, my organization does some of that. We should have a conversation." So randomly, when you have a thought process, no matter how you think it's throwaway, say it. Number 1, yeah? Talk to people out loud. Talk to yourself out loud. Because sometimes I have ideas in my head and I keep it to myself. When I'm prepping for an interview, or when I'm preparing to do anything, or doing a presentation, hearing your voice, timing it, hearing the mood of your voice, how it's projected. I've got the voice in my head and I've got the voice vocally. You need to hear yourself in both ways and know which one to turn down or to turn up. So sometimes I'll say, stop talking. Sometimes I'll say, turn down the voice in my head. You need to have a good understanding of self. Yeah. So people can give you feedback, but you really need to know yourself. Yeah. You really need to know that if somebody's told you, well, that's good or that's bad, you can say, and we are very much brought up as humans, as I would say, "Oh, he doesn't like me. She doesn't like me. She doesn't." I remember going home and telling my parents, "The teacher doesn't like me." My mother gave me one look and said, "So what?" It's not about like, it's about did you do the thing that she asked you to do? Did you prepare and do your homework? Did you deliver? Liking, and there are many people in this space, when you're out there and you're vulnerable, they will judge you on your personality. You cannot take that on. So you need to know self. You need to be able to critique yourself and know self. And I would also say a network of people. When I have been relentless in my career, sometimes I've allowed myself to be absorbed in people. And when I say network, you need your professional network, but you need your community network. Friends, family, no matter what, good or bad, will tell you the truth. The more successful you get, the more people will look at your badge and want to tell you the optimism view of the world. "Oh, Chyrel, that was great. Oh, Chyrel, oh, well done here, clap, clap, clap." And you know in yourself that sometimes ain't great, or you put something out. But when I go home or I show that to my sister, she'll go, "That was a pile of pants. What are you doing?" You need people to keep you real. And you need people that will check you when your head gets too big, or you are working too much, or you are more stressed than you should be, that are going to tell you that you don't sound or look like yourself. So I would say, speak to the universe, tell people, talk it out loud, look after yourself, know yourself, and then the network beyond your professional career to help you maintain your mental health and your well-being.
Chyrel, thank you for those insights. I couldn't have asked for a more insightful response to all of the questions that I've asked. I really appreciate you taking time to be on the show. Before we depart, if you could just let me know what you'd consider to be your next step. So where do you see yourself in the next 10 years? You did mention something about philanthropy and stuff like that, but what else is in the stars for you, Chyrel?
So on Saturday, I randomly was standing on the top of Primrose Hill, and I was like, oh my gosh, you know, like literally you get this job and it's huge. And as I said today, I get to do some amazing things. But when I stood on Primrose Hill, I was like, I've got all this skill, I've got all this knowledge, but actually the world is so big. What could I do next? And I think also sometimes you get truth bearers that come into your life that are random, that set you on for a different course. So randomly, somebody that I work with, that I have a very sort of just a sort of a work type relationship, no big colleague or anything, came up to me and said, what's next for you? Because you are so good. And I was like, like literally, well, where did that come from? But he said, like, I think you've created an easy path for yourself. You've gone housing, the ops manager, you've done all the things because you've learned how to do it and you've done it. How do you challenge yourself to be out of your comfort zone and test how big or how wide you could be? Because I think your capabilities are more than actually that you are, recognizing in yourself. And I was like, wow. So I stood on top of Primrose Hill thinking, well, what is this solution? And I haven't yet come up with the answer. But I think that the looking out on the horizon, and also in these times of COVID, to show how connected the world actually is. You know, I don't know, the world's not oyster, but I'm excited about what's to come.
Chyrel, thank you. Just for those that are listening, this broadcast will be recorded, so it will be available on YouTube going forward. If I could ask you to subscribe to my YouTube channel, and we hope to have more broadcasts like this in the near future. Look out for the next one, which is with Safia Boot next week, Thursday, on the 23rd. Thanks, Chyrel.
Thank you.